There's been months and months of reports on Jimmy Butler, and there's just been weeks and weeks of suspensions handed out by the Miami Heat. We're talking about a situation that has constant breaking news, with very little news actually being given out. We've talked about what Shams said on Christmas Day about Jimmy Butler, yada yada yada. Folks have pontificated on the suspension and what it means long term for the Miami Heat, yada yada yada. And at this point, I think we are all over this whole story at this point. But the reason why we just cannot turn away and not listen to this is because it's still holding up much of the market.
Endless saga of Jimmy Butler in the Miami Heat because after
Yeah, it's an endless saga that we all want to be over now. Like we want this to end. We literally want this to end. It doesn't matter how many times Wendy tells us that something's going on, because nothing has been going on over the last 3 weeks. So what gives? What's actually going on?
Right, what happens next in this Riley versus Butler saga?
Well, Jimmy Butler's going to get traded. I wasn't sure about that maybe 7 to 10 days ago. I really am more sure than ever that that's going to happen. The Heat are trying to make it happen. They have backed down on their asks to teams that they had 2-3 weeks ago when this whole saga really started. They're willing.
Okay, so what the fuck? Like, just get it done. Like, what's going on?
I have to say, working on this story every day for 6-7 weeks, this is truly one of the most immovable forts meets impenetrable objects I've ever seen in my 22 years covering the NBA.
And what basically Windhorse is saying that Pat Riley and Jimmy Butler have butted heads so often, and neither is budging, to the point where teams are now sensing that the Heat are going to have to settle with the worst offer that's available. So they're going to settle with the best, worst offer. Teams know this, and so they're not really rushing this. But the Heat, they need to do something, but they're waiting until the last minute yet again, obviously. And that's also really what I want to talk about, man. This Miami Heat team. I've made a video about the Heat, which you can check out in the annotation that's going to show up. But Bradley Beal is the biggest sticking point here, where the guy's obviously the one controlling where he wants to go because he has no trade clause, obviously. And that's the big sticking point with a trade to Phoenix not happening. I mean, if Bradley Beal doesn't want to go to Milwaukee or Chicago or whatever other team that's open to taking him in, well, then Miami's not going to be able to trade Jimmy to where he wants, which is Phoenix. And then you got Jimmy not wanting to go to Memphis, and that's probably because they're the one team that could literally pull this trade off easily, win now, and all they need is for Butler to be like, yeah, why not? But because he said no, that makes it worse for the Heat, because now there's one less team that's willing to make a decent offer that they would like. And that's really where we're at with this whole Jimmy Butler saga. Until further notice, nothing's going to happen. Well, thankfully for everyone watching at home, a new player has arrived. And not just that, Shams is telling us here that De'Aaron Fox, the Kings are open to trading him. And so now there's buzz around a player now that is way harder of a trade target than Jimmy Butler was, right, for the last month now. The Kings, they were playing incredible basketball, believe it or not, before that Fox news came in from Shams. And so people were taken aback a little bit, like, oh, isn't this team starting to win games now?
Told the San Antonio Spurs, according to league sources, are De'Aaron Fox's targeted preferred destination.
And just like the Jimmy Butler situation, yet again, a player controlling his leverage, basically telling teams, yeah, I want to go to San Antonio. And what makes this deal even more interesting is that San Antonio is a team that's able to do this trade without many hurdles like the Suns have, right? Beal's no trade clause and whatnot, tight salaries and stuff. The Spurs, they're flexible.
Castle is the key factor in that one because Castle is the key piece that you would want in that deal, and they love Castle.
A huge sticking point that has come in the last few days is apparently the Spurs not wanting to include Stephon Castle in the deal. But as some sources have pointed out, this deal might actually be close to being finished. Now, I will say some of these sources seem less credible than others. I mean, look, man, using an AI picture of De'Aaron Fox on your tweet, like, come on, bro, what are we doing, bro? But again, there does seem to be momentum towards a deal being completed soon, which is not something that could have been said about Jimmy Butler even a month ago up to now. So most likely, I'm recording this on Friday, but most likely before this video even gets published, a deal should happen. There's a framework already being worked on. Apparently, it's multi-team. Many sources have repeated the same thing. But we're just not sure yet of the deal. Now, obviously, one thing that's changed is that the CBA, obviously, in 2023 was signed and it has now been enacted for the 2025-26 season. And obviously, some of these guys here, not all of them, obviously, Iguodala's not in the CBA, the Players Union anymore, but some of these people are in the Players Union, and they fucked up the trade market, basically. the NBA now has to adhere to a second apron. And let's just say that for teams that exceed the first or second apron, there's going to be some strict penalties, like you can't aggregate salaries in a trade unless the trade puts you under the second apron. And as we know, these are the 4 teams in the NBA that are currently over that said second apron that, are involved in some of these deals perhaps being made very soon. The Suns being one of them. Obviously, that poses a big obstacle for the Miami Heat to trade Jimmy Butler. That's a big obstacle. Okay, the Bucks could also be involved in a deal to potentially upgrade from Middleton or from Portis, but because they're in the second apron, they need to shelve off some salary like a Connaughton or even Bobby so that they can actually make a trade involving multiple players. You see, this is where the tricky part comes in, because Miami is a first apron team, okay? They're right there under Milwaukee and the Knicks. And so they're also in the pickle because they have to adhere to some of these, restrictions that are being placed now with this new CBA. Thanks a lot, CJ McCollum. Thanks a lot, Grant Williams. I mean, what the hell do you even do on the court anymore? Actually, I shouldn't be saying that. He did get hurt recently. He's out for the season, unfortunately. I'm not gonna go too hard on him. And look at my Greek king. Oh, Giannis. But yeah, CBA bad. And teams make harder trades now because hard trades. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. But that's a big change. And now teams have to maneuver over this stuff. But that's not a good enough excuse. Some deals can be made, even with the CBA haunting some of these teams now. Namely, OKC with Sam Presti basically having so many picks that he can easily make a deal for, say, a Cam Johnson, for example. Even the Cavs, who have 3 All-Stars now, they can make a deal for Cam Johnson. Both Cleveland and OKC are well under the first apron, not to mention the second apron. Especially OKC, who is one of the least expensive teams, despite being the best team in the Western Conference, one of the best teams in the league, with an astounding record. So both teams are in prime position to go after Cam Johnson. Okay, I'm not going to hype up Cam Johnson too much because, the Cavs, they could be conservative here. And, they're a good team, so they don't have to go all in on the Cam Johnson. Not to mention, they're going to have to give up like a Sam Merrill, George Niang, some of their assets, Isaac Okoro. I stuttered there so much, man. Basically, I feel like the Cavs, it makes sense for them not to go after Cam, especially knowing that OKC can go after him with an offer that the Cavs just cannot match. The Cavs have way less picks, and the OKC Thunder have so many more flexible assets that they can move, down to Aaron Wiggins, Isaiah Joe, to where it wouldn't even make a dent on their team in terms of flexibility, in terms of even picks allocated for multiple years down the line. I mean, these guys have so many picks from so many other teams that they could trade in like 3 of their lesser valuable first round picks just to get Cam Johnson. And I know if they don't want to do that, maybe just 2 2 first round picks, with one of them being very valuable, more so valuable, not the most valuable, obviously. You get what I'm trying to say there. Now, look, I know that this is not going to match what a real GM is going to do in terms of a deal, because obviously we can't really replicate real life scenarios in the NBA. So if I trade one of Aaron Wiggins or Isaiah Joe, I'll just take Isaiah Joe, and I'll trade in, let's see here, a salary fair like a Kenrich Williams. And if the Nets do ask for Nikola Topic, we'll put him in as well. Look, that's all OKC needs to trade in terms of assets. And then amongst picks, I'm not going to put them here, but they could trade in for 3 first round picks that, they don't really need, right? And this alone is enough to get Cam Johnson in terms of salary, okay? They don't even have to include Topic, but I'm sure the Brooklyn Nets are going to ask for Nikola Topic's contract. Not just that, because he's a 6'6" guard. Okay, I think Brooklyn, they're interested in Nikola Topic, so they'll be like, hey, if you're not giving us this nigga, let's just say Cam Johnson will not be on your team. It makes sense. But there's a report like a couple weeks ago saying that the Thunder are focused on their returning players and they don't want to go and pursue Cam Johnson, which I think I just think this is just too much, man. Like, too much in terms of Sam Presti, you don't have to settle. You can go all in and not even feel a dent on your team in terms of flexibility. Like, this is the perfect move. Let's be honest, bro. Some of your role players, they're just not good. Like some of the role players in Boston, for example, Derek White or Drew Holiday. Let's be honest, if OKC matched up against these guys, with the role players namely being Cason Wallace, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, I just don't think that's good enough to match up against the Celtics, who obviously don't have the depth that OKC has, which is, fair point to make. You have Alex Caruso off the bench as well. You have Lou Dort starting. You have just a bevy of players that you can fall back on. But I just think OKC could go all in here and still retain one of Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins. Even Cason Wallace could be retained. Look, you don't have to give up all these guys, and you can still get a player in Cam Johnson that is something that I think OKC desperately needs. And I think that's obvious if you've watched enough Thunder games with role players just seemingly not being able to make their threes. OKC, who already doesn't attempt nearly as many threes as the Celtics do, right? 35 versus the Celtics' 48 three-point attempts a game. Well, the Celtics, despite going on a rough stretch in January, are still more efficient from the three-point line than OKC is. And that's a problem that I think is going to rear its ugly head in the playoffs. The later the OKC plays in the playoffs, the more this problem will rear its ugly head. The Mavericks just seem to have the Thunder's number. I don't know what it is with this team, but the role players in Dallas, they come up and they shine. The role players for the Thunder, they freeze. They don't show up in these matchups. And Dallas is going to be a key opponent that right now, according to the standings, I know these things can change. According to the standings, if the playoffs are today, you'd play the Mavs in the first round. You might lose in the first round because you were just too okay with the team as is. Cam Johnson's right there. He would change the entire complexity of that series. I'm telling you this because it's the same reason Sam Presti, to this day, after 20 plus years of being a GM for the Thunder, still has no ring to his name. He's had teams, formidable teams, like the one with Westbrook, KD, and Harden that lost in the finals, right? That team could have extended Harden to a contract, but because of the repeater tax, right? That's the excuse they'll use. Repeater tax at the time, understandably so, they just let him go. But the trade they made to the Houston Rockets was a very underwhelming trade to where they didn't get enough back for James Harden. Not just that, but instead, you could have gone all in, even with the repeater tax penalties, and you'd still be okay. You'd still be able to trade Harden later down the line when he would up his value, his contract be higher. Not just that, come on, bro. I'm telling you, the Thunder have had chances to retain their teams. Not just that, chances to compete and go all in. And when the chance arises for Presti to go all in, he just doesn't do it. And if this is a plan for Presti to basically wait till the deadline until, Brooklyn Nets ask for the lowest possible offer if that's what it is, I don't think the Thunder need to wait any longer. The Cavs, I get what they're doing. It makes sense. They don't have enough assets to where it would justify making a trade like that, but the Thunder do. They sure do. Not just that, but the Thunder can afford to go all in now. And in a year or two, when the contracts from J-Dub and Chet Holmgren kick in, then they could, okay, now we got to think about trading some of these guys. That's when they could start doing that. OKC's books right now is light. They're flexible. These guys are contending and they're flexible. They can afford to put in Cam Johnson's contract, trade up, 2 or 3 of their guys, and still have 2-3 more guys coming in the pipeline. I mean, this is just ridiculous to me why a trade like this is not being made. It's a no-brainer. It's the most no-brainer trade that could be had with no CBA restrictions implicated here. But Sam Presti still thinks, we don't need to haste. We don't need to do anything. And mark my words, this might be why you might potentially lose in the playoffs earlier than expected. I'm expecting the Thunder to at least make the conference finals. If they can't even make it to the conference finals this season, that's a failure of a season. I'm telling you right now, that's the expectations. It's a championship or bust almost. I'm not going to go that far because I'll let them breathe a little. Look. They haven't even made the conference finals yet with this iteration of the squad. But pressure's on Presti right now to get this title, get himself a championship. And for a second, I thought nobody would really put pressure on Presti. But when I saw Stephen A. Smith put pressure on Presti a while ago, right? Last year, he was like praising him, but he was also saying, you got to get a championship at some point. And this year, Look, this year, I know the YouTube thing is lagging. I don't care. This year, I think Stephen A. Smith has been pushing the envelope even more, saying, Presti, the clock is ticking. You got to get that chip. And like, bro, it's been 20 years, bro. 20 plus years. Bro, come on, bro. I'm not giving you a pass anymore. If he genuinely thinks these guys are good enough now to win a championship, I don't see it. I honestly don't see it. I don't think these guys are good enough. The role players being Aaron Riggins, Isaiah Joe, Casey Wallace, Alex Caruso, who's been struggling with injuries. I just don't think these guys are good enough, even healthy. But that's just one team. There are other trades that could be made. The Bulls are obvious sellers, even back to the last offseason, right? Where the Warriors had a chance to trade up for LaVine in the buy low offer, and they just didn't. Even Vucevic was available in the summer. But now LaVine's value in terms of trades has risen. Okay, so teams now have to offer up more than they did last summer when the Warriors were right there. They could have just given up Chris Paul's contract and gotten LaVine. Like, bro, do you know how crazy that is? That they could have gotten him? Again, that video is going to be available. It'll pop up somewhere here. You guys can watch that. I recently talked about that whole thing. And guess who's rearing its ugly head again, trying to get LaVine? The Warriors. Yep, the Warriors. They're back. Apparently, they're even talking about getting Vucevic as well. I mean, Golden State, you could have done it months ago. Like, what's going on, bro? And that's why I made my video that I did recently about these guys. Because it's just so stupid what they're doing and what's going on over there, bro. It's their fault they're in a situation like this. Their fault. I don't want to hear anything about the Warriors standing pat. I don't want to hear any excuses, any sympathy. They did this to themselves. But again, all I've said are trade frameworks that could happen, teams that are interested. All that you're hearing right now is noise. Why is that? Why is it that there's no trades being made right now? What's going on? And look, I did highlight the CBA, how it makes it difficult. And the Warriors, they are close to the tax, if not hard capped at the first apron. So they also have to be careful of how they navigate this whole thing, right? Andrew Wiggins, are they going to give him up? Well, if they give him up, that's depth that is lost at the wing position. They need LaVine and Wiggins to be together, right? They need somehow to trade for LaVine to where it doesn't include Wiggins in the trade. So that's why a trade hasn't happened yet. That's why there's multiple teams being involved so that, you know, other teams can help out and be facilitators. That's why we're hearing of multi-teams deals often these days, because it's just so damn hard for these teams to really, you know, do a framework that makes sense for both parties, that only includes each other. But again, something smells here. Chicago, they've been a team that has, you know, stand pat, just like the Miami Heat have for years. They haven't traded much of their players to where now they're trying to trade LaVine in this big contract that he has, and despite his value rising, they still can't agree to a deal with any team. And now we're hearing the Hawks being mentioned as a team that could facilitate in a Jimmy Butler trade so that Bogdanovic's contract can be moved, because apparently the Hawks now want to trade Bogdanovich. What the hell is even going on anymore? So much noise, but no movement. Let's just really try to decipher a bit of this, okay? Why the hell are there no trades being made, okay? As of now, Friday, January 31st, why are there no trades being made? The deadline is in less than a week. And look, I've given you answers, right? And we're hearing just more and more noise. Toronto apparently now, a team that is supposedly tanking now, has won 7 of the last 8 games. But guess what? They're apparently interested in Brandon Ingram. Like, what? Are you not trying to tank? What's going on here, bro? I'm a Raptors fan. I don't want this to happen. I don't want Brandon Ingram to get traded. But at the same time, if he's available, and if there's not many teams that are interested, New Orleans might be in a position, because they do want to avoid the tax. Again, a lot of these teams do want to sell, okay? And the Raptors have contracts that are expendable, expiring, that they could trade off easily. And maybe they could trade RJ Barrett in as a big piece so that New Orleans could be happy with a semblance of a return that is decent for Brandon Ingram, because clearly they don't want to pay him. Clearly he's demanding way too much money. And there's reports now that apparently the Raptors are willing to give Ingram the contract he wants. Oh my God. I hope that's not true, bro. I don't want this to happen. Do you know how stupid that sounds, bro? The Hawks might be interested in Brandon Ingram too. Like, that's how much noise there is. So many teams talking to each other over multiple different players around, surfacing around multiple deals that could happen. And nothing's happened over like the last 3 weeks since Phoenix traded those picks in. What is going on? All I can say is expect a trade or two to happen this weekend. Okay, it's probably Saturday when you're watching this. Expect more trades to happen leading up to the deadline. So Wednesday, Thursday. Thursday is like the trade deadline at 3 p.m. Eastern. That's when all trades are basically done. Like you can't make a trade anymore. Expect a lot of these trades to happen either this weekend or leading up to the deadline on Wednesday, Thursday. But believe me, there's a lot of noise. And with this much noise, look, it could be all smoke. It could mostly be, just people talking. But a trade's going to happen. 2 trades might happen. I think it's going to be a crazy deadline. I'm not going to lie to you. Stay tuned because you're going to be very shocked at some of these names that are getting moved. I'm telling you, there's too much noise for something not to happen. That's all I'm going to say. All right, peace out.